today at the successfully submitting the California Dream application, and we're also going to be talking about the implementation of the California Dream application at the public universities. So in terms of what today's presentation is going to be, we're going to have an overview of the Dream application and important things that you should think about when students are applying for the Dream application. That's going to take about 20 or 25 minutes, and that's the presentation you have in your hand. After that, I'm going to pass to I'm really honored that I have the opportunity to be here with people from the California Student Aid Commission, the community colleges, the UCs, and myself representing the CSUs. So afterwards, you guys are going to have the opportunities to actually ask questions about, well, how does it work in here? I'm not exactly sure about that, so you can get a little bit more in depth, and the majority of the workshop is actually going to be doing that. So my name's Nancy Chaditis. I work at San Francisco State University. I'm a financial aid counselor there. I work as an AB 540 advisor, and that kind of put me in a really good position that when the California Dream Act came in, to work to be the Dream Act coordinator as well. And then I also do lots of volunteer work with the Educator Action Group, and I was one of those people at that team. So I'm really excited to be here 3 years later. So I'm here with Brian Dickinson from the California Student Aid Commission, Rochelle Feldman from the University of California, Berkeley, Margie Carrington from Kenyatta College, and all of them are going to be giving a brief introduction when we actually pass into the second part of the presentation. And in terms of what I'm going to try to go through, I know I talk really fast, and I try to cram lots of information in there. This year I tried to mediate that a little bit by A, of course, always trying to slow down, and B, actually passing out the presentation that I'm giving. So if you can't capture all the words, I'm not going to read everything on the slide. I'm going to try to highlight the information for you. It's a little too fast, try to slow me down. But also just remember that you have this information available for you, so if you can't remember the specific details, it's there for you now. And just, oh, sorry, I guess I forgot that part of it. So just in terms of what we're going to go over, I have a couple of key points I want to make sure that you guys remember, and then actually do a quick overview of the application, when and how to apply, who should be filling out the application, and more importantly, who should not, and then do they need parental information? What are some of the specific problems we saw in the second year of the implementation? And then how can you make sure that you successfully submit your Dream application and all the amazing resources that are actually right out there at the tip of your fingers and being able to call to get information for yourself and for your students. So just in terms of key things to remember, I know a lot of you guys probably already know this, but there's still some confusion when I talk to students in terms of Dream and DACA, and that somehow they have something to do to each other. So I just want to remind everyone that they're completely separate. Students don't have to get their DACA in order to be able to apply for the Dream. Applying for DACA doesn't mean you have Dream eligibility. They're separate because one's state and one's federal. And then also just to remember too that DACA doesn't confer a new citizenship status for students. It gives them lawful presence, it puts a stay of deportation, but it doesn't change their citizenship status. So that's why it doesn't make them eligible for FAFSA. So DACA does not equal FAFSA, and we'll go over that in detail. And then you guys all know about AB 130 and 131, but the reason I put this slide up there is just to remind everybody that AB 540 is the basis. You have to meet the AB 540 eligibility, 3 years of high school, graduating from a California high school, in order to then be able to see if you meet the other eligibility, income eligibility, and other details to see that you actually make eligibility for the Dream, at least for the AB 131. Then, how many of you guys have already used the application this year? Anybody? So I used it right away. January 6th it was available. It's so much easier to use than it was last year. Big hats to the California Student Aid Commission for all their hard work. I know they looked for a lot of input, and I'm so grateful for all the work that they did. It's so much easier to use. There's a new look and format, and then they actually go through the steps about DACA and Dream. Like, do you have a social, and we'll go, like, should you be applying for the Dream? And then they've separated out, just like the FAFSA, individual tabs and all the different pieces. And then there's great skip logic. So if you answer the yes to one question, it's just going to jump you to the next question that you need to use. And there's also all this little helpful like pop-ups and stuff for those of you that are familiar with the FAFSA. That the Dream has that too. So you can just put your mouse where it needs to go, and it'll give you hints about what you should be getting information that you provided in there. And then it also is, there's a confirmation page. It's just so easy to see. It's right there. And that confirmation page is the student's real, in my opinion, their real success tool to make sure that they actually have submitted the application successfully and that the California Student Aid Commission isn't waiting for anything else. How are you doing so far? Okay? Not too fast?
I just heard the first sentence you said.
So in terms of, I'll try to slow down a little bit. In terms of the dream application, this is just kind of the structure of the dream. It's a little bit more condensed. It's a little bit more broken up into sections, so it's easier for me to follow. Student questions, whether or not the parents actually have to put that information in, that's the dependency information. If they do, parent questions and information and income, the student signature page, confirmation page, and you can actually see the California Student Aid report right on there. After you do the confirmation page and they process it, students can look for that right on their dream application. So it's a high-tech model. And I talk really fast, like I said, and I'm going to tell you tons of things. If there's one thing that you remember today, I really hope that it's this date, March 2nd. And the bells are tolling just for me, because if you miss that bus, right? That little bus is the Cal Grant bus. It's the financial aid bus at the California student, at the CSUs. For many schools, the priority date of March 2nd is a determination of whether you get a grant or whether you don't. So we want our students to be on that bus. So March 2nd is definitely the day. And technically, March 2nd is a Sunday. So, but please don't tell anybody that, right, until March 3rd. They're like, oh, I missed it. You're like, okay, you have one more day. But we're really trying to promote the idea of March 2nd because it's the same as FAFSA, and that way students can get into the idea of January, February, time to do your dream or your FAFSA. March 2nd comes along, all right, then you're done. Do you have someone?
So after your application is processed and you're eligible, that would take place in the fall and spring semester of the following year?
Yeah, we're applying now in January and February for the upcoming 14-15 years.
Not,
So
not summer school, right?
not summer school, no, summer school separate. Yeah. And then, like I said, the online application's already available. It's all the way started on January 6th. And it is that priority filing deadline, so if a student doesn't make the deadline, they still should go ahead to see if there's some opportunities available for them, but know that they're going to be limited. So this is, you guys have probably seen the new look in terms of the dream application, but starting the dream application, if you save it and you want to log back in, there it is. And this middle button is super important in terms of this is how the parents sign the parent application. So providing a student signature means signed student application. And if for some people they find it easier to just print out this application, it's right on the CalDreamAct.org website, and I find it easy to just look at the questions in hand, but of course you really want the students to be filling it out online. And then just going back into who can fill out the dream application. The dream application is made for two specific populations, students who are AB 540 students, as well as students who hold a U visa. Those are the only populations that should be filling out the California Dream application. And this just on the paper application it says, you know, like these are the conditions in terms of filling out the California Dream application. Citizens and legal permanent residents, just as always, do the FAFSA. And anybody who is an eligible non-citizen. Eligible non-citizens also use the FAFSA application, and they actually go through and list refugee, asylum, you know, like conditional entrant, all of the specifics of what is an eligible non-citizen is listed there. The only other population is some of our students are T visa holders. If we're working with dreamers who are T visa holders, they should fill out the FAFSA. Everybody else should be filling out the dream. And the thing that I find really exciting in terms of like, wait, which application should I fill out? What's the other one? They actually go through those steps, like I said. So they write first question when you fill out the dream, do you have a social? And if they say you have a social, did you get that through DACA? So if you answer yes to both of those questions, it's going to lead you on to the next part, which is, do you meet the eligibility for AB 540? So if you're able to say that you meet all of those qualifications, then you should proceed for the dream application. And we're hoping that will try to weed out some of the confusion for students who filled out the FAFSA but should have filled out the dream and then don't even know that they can go back and fix it. So this should be helpful. And then just again, making sure that students know that they're actually classified as an AB 540 student at their school. Residency can, based on some students, you know, they might or might not be considered actually classified as AB 540 students. For the state aid, they actually need to be classified as an AB 540 student at the school. Cal Grant has a little bit of leeway, but just make sure they get that confirmation back from the school that they have been classified as an AB 540 student. And then in case they're confused when they're filling out the application, it actually says that I'm a U.S. citizen, I'm an eligible non-citizen, and then I'm not a citizen or an eligible non-citizen. So all of our dreamers who are undocumented, even if they went through DACA, should be filling out that third option. That's the only student population that should be filling out the dream.
Sorry, you mentioned that students receive confirmation that they've been classified as an AB 540 students. Students are already aware of that classification, or is that something that they're eventually informed about?
Some schools are proactive and try to let them know. Other students, you just have to be like, I'm AB 540, here's my affidavit, here's my high school transcripts, and follow through with the school to make sure that they classify you.
Not necessarily all students will know.
No, no. So students need to be very proactive in terms of getting information, and I'll show you some websites where they can get more clarity about what that is, but they need to be the ones who are the engine that are moving the train. And then the thing I think that's, for those of us that have already had a little bit of experience filling out the FAFSA, it's good that the FAFSA and the DREAM, they're really mirror applications. And they've actually changed it so you can see, so these are some of those tabs I was talking about that let you know, and then also a timer now. So if your students remind students to save their application. So sometimes because it's actually a mirror application, some of the questions don't really make sense, but if they don't pertain to your students, just put zeros or leave it blank and go forward with that. In terms of documents needed, they're really interested in household size and household income. That's one of the main ways that they determine whether you have eligibility. So you need to pull together all of your different kinds of income forms, tax records, tax returns if they have them, if anybody pays child support, any kind of scholarships that come up on taxes, money in the bank, all that information. They're going to want you, the student and the parent, if they are parents required, to put that information in. So gathering some of that information together now is good. If they don't have it, they could always get started on the application, save it, and then get those documents from their parents or from themselves as they need to, just making sure that they submit it before that March 2nd deadline.
The California DREAM Act is at the state level, FAFSA is federal level.
Right.
Why are they working together if they represent two different levels?
They're, I don't think that they're really working, it's not that they're working together, it's that the population, the formula was already there, so they're just trying to follow, and the financial aid offices were already set up to receive FAFSA information. So is my understanding, but please confirm, Brian.
Well, yeah, it's not so much that they're working, they serve different student populations. State law says we have to determine financial aid eligibility for the state the same way we do as the FAFSA. And then the FAFSA says we don't serve undocumented students. If they fill it out, they don't get the result, and it doesn't help them. So we have a state application that does the same thing to serve AB 540 students.
Just to clarify, Nancy's just showing them side by side on the screen. The student doesn't see both of them. She's just showing that they work the same way. So it's an equitable treatment and the same formula for all students, whether they're undocumented or documented. And it really does, the schools wouldn't be able to, colleges and universities wouldn't be able to easily help the students if we couldn't easily import the information and do the same calculations. So the state really, and CSAC really did a good job trying to make it as simple as possible to remove barriers for those students in applying.
It's just that there was a box that you said to check off if you're DACA under the California DREAM Act, and I'm just wondering what they're using that box
the
for.
schools use that box to determine whether we can offer institutional work study if the school has it. Nancy will go over that later. So it's an indication to us that there's the ability to offer some work study to the student because they have a work authorization. I don't know if you use it for anything else. That's all. Yeah, that's all.
And the community colleges, from what I'm aware, we don't use that box because if we don't have institutional work study, we may have student employment. So if somebody has DACA eligibility, they can work as tutors, they can work on campus, they can work in the bookstore. They're employable, but they're not under your federal aid work study program. They're just a student assistant like any other student assistant with legal residency status or citizenship. So.
Yeah, I had a student asking about parents' income tax returns, like if they're using a different social security number.
Yeah, we're going to go over that in one
Okay.
second. Just a couple minutes left, because we do have to talk about how income is verified. And then just in terms of whether parents actually have to provide their income, this is how the student knows. They're required to provide parent information unless they were born before January 1st of 1991, if they're married. They have their own children, or they're other people for whom they provide more than 50% of their support. If they're attending graduate school, or they're armed forces or veterans, or they meet like in legal guardianship or a court-certified minor in the United States. If they don't meet any of these requirements, the parent information is required to be on the DREAM application. And like I just wanted to highlight in terms of in these situations where someone is in a legal guardianship or someone's in foster care, it has to be something that took place, that transpired within the United States. I work with some students and their mom or dad might have given legal guardianship to them in their country of origin to come with their older brother or sister to be here in the United States. They still would be required to put their parents' information in there because that legal guardianship document took place in their home country, not here in the United States. So that's just an important distinction to remember. And when they're talking about parental information, I'll get to the income question in one sec. When they're talking about parental information, they're talking only about biological or adoptive parents. They're not talking about a grandmother that you live with or your aunt or uncle. They're just talking about biological or adoptive parents. The only reason that that information would not be included is unless it would cause some kind of physical or emotional harm for the student to contact their parent. And in that case, then they would contact the financial aid office, write a letter documenting what's going on, and then see what the next steps would be from that financial aid office that they're with. So even if parents are living in another country, they're still required to put parental information on the application. And I tell students, especially because a lot of times they're in communication by phone, could you get your mom or dad on the phone, you sit at the computer and work with them together to be able to get the information that they need to put that information in. If they don't have any kind of access to the application or by the phone, then they would actually you'd have to send a signature page to the parent and have them send that signature page back. So you want your students who have parents living in other countries to start early because they might have to do a transmit like that in terms of getting that information back. And when they fill out the application, they're going to ask you, did you work, did you file taxes? Parents who live in other countries should answer that question correctly and then just convert that into US dollars. So if they earn this much money in their country, they'd say, okay, I did file, I filed foreign taxes, and this is how much US dollars I earned. And then proceed on with the application and make sure that the parent signs it and that the parent's signature is part of the DREAM application prior to March 2nd. So that's really important. I think I put that in twice, sorry. So in terms of income that you need to report, you need to report any income and cash support, even if it's cash support that's given in to you by relatives, except for food and housing. So regardless of whether you file taxes or not, regardless of the social with which you file taxes, although I would talk more specifically about that, you are supposed to report the income that you earned in California or in the United States or afar. In another country. And if the student is under 24, then their parents are required to put that information in as well. So if you're living with your aunt and your uncle, or you're living with the parents are living with a brother and the sister, they don't have to support they don't have to report food and housing support, but if they get some other income from those family members, they are required to put that on the DREAM application. In terms of your question specifically about what if parents are working with another social security number, that's a very sticky situation, and I would want to talk to the parent individually, but as a rule, if you do file the DREAM application and you put your income information on there, some parents and some students are going to get selected for income verification. So they are going to actually have to be able to present their tax returns, present their W-2s, or present the kind of proof of the money that they earned. So that's why I don't have a quick, easy answer for what those parents should do. For some parents that haven't filed taxes, I tell parents, you don't need to have your taxes filed in order to be able to actually fill out the application. I would say put in the income that you've earned, and if you get selected for income verification, then at that point you would have to work out how you're going to report your income, report your taxes, because if you earn the income requirement that the IRS reports you to file taxes for, you will be required to present those documents to the school.
Nancy, one thing. That requirement, the tax filing requirement, was not intended to be a barrier. And we've tried to deal with that as best as we can. One thing to just remember is that in order to get this legislation passed, in order to convince the doubters that this was a good thing, we had to show that we were being equitable and treating this population the same as this population. So Nancy is 100% correct. The longer you can postpone having the talk with the parents that you really can't use someone else's social security number to file taxes, the better. So wait until they're asked by the campus to verify the income, and that's when you kind of got to get down and say, well, here's what has to happen. It is one of those difficult things, and the more experience that you can talk amongst yourself, saying, what did you do? What did you do at your campus? You know, this is a way that you can gain that experience to best counsel those students and parents.
Thank you. And then just again, that March 2nd deadline, because it's so super important. And even if parents haven't filed taxes or children haven't filed their taxes yet, they don't have to stress out and get their taxes done before March 2nd. There's an option built right into the application where they say, I will file my taxes. They estimate that income so that they can get that information in correctly. They submit it, meet the March 2nd deadline, and then after April 15th, after they do their taxes, they just go back to the DREAM application, and they change that from will file to already filed, and then they just take the exact numbers and put it in. So they know exactly how that information should be updated, and it's actually correct when they say they already filed their taxes. And then just in terms of, okay, why am I so busy talking about March 2nd, March 2nd? The reason I'm so busy talking about it is because everything in blue is based on the fact that students, if they're going to a four-year university, meet that March 2nd deadline. The Cal Grant A, the Cal Grant B, and for the majority of the CSU, or for many of the CSU campuses, you need to meet the March 2nd deadline in order to have eligibility for the university grants or the Cal Grants. Are UCs on that same March 2nd deadline too?
Mostly.
Mostly.
Well, everyone is for Cal Grant.
Okay, everybody is for Cal Grants.
And I would say, we should say that they all are for blue and gold, which is the guarantee that if your income's under $80,000, your tuition is covered, even if you don't have a Cal Grant. And most campuses enforce that deadline. We're a little loosey-goosey at Berkeley, but if you just encourage everyone to file by March 2nd, they're gonna hit all the campuses.
All the campuses, yeah. So don't tell anybody not to file after March 2nd, still try, but just do everything you can to get students to be able to do that, because that's some pretty good money that we're talking about.
Just a quick question about the comment you just made about getting the waiver if your income comes under level. Is that Board of Governors waiver for tuition? What?
No,
That's
that's for community college. I also wanted to make add to this. For Cal Grant B eligibility at the community colleges, there's an access grant, and it's it's part of this total amount that students are awarded for the Cal Grant B. Those students attending community colleges also need to meet that March 2nd deadline. If they are awarded a Cal Grant B and they miss that deadline, or if they miss that deadline, they're not going to get a Cal Grant B. So March 2nd is the deadline for any Cal Grant A or B eligibility, regardless of what segment that they are going to. And the Board of Governors fee waiver, there's different ways to qualify for the Board of Governors fee waiver, which is for the community colleges. It waives the per unit enrollment fee for the year. So that isn't enforced by this deadline. Students, if they miss this deadline for whatever reason, and they were coming to a community college at the time that they apply for admissions, at the time they're actually registering for classes, almost every community college will allow them to apply right at that moment for a Board of Governors fee waiver. And there's a short form that allows them to do it without having to do the DREAM application. And if they have a higher income or don't meet that eligibility, we are encouraging them to do the DREAM application because it allows students with higher income families to also qualify for the fee waiver.
I was trying to go ahead.
In regards to the Cal Grant C, is there a deadline for that too for community college?
Ryan, that's kind of a rolling, is that?
Cal Grant C
Yeah.
also has a March 2nd deadline.
March 2nd.
Is it also in the September 2nd cycle? Do you?
Oh, the competitors.
Yeah, the competitive Cal Grants are split into two pools, one for March 2nd and one for September 2nd. However, when they passed AB 131, the enabling legislation, they, not specifically, but made it actually impossible for a dreamer to get a September 2nd Cal Grant. Basically, they said, if there's any money left over, you can give it to undocumented students, and there's never been any money left over. So, March 2nd is.
So just
the
remember
deadline.
March 2nd.
March 2nd, yeah. So March 2nd, we're talking about the state university grants, which is the BOG at the community college, the state grant at the CSU, and the UC grants at the UCs. But because of the UCs have also institutional funds, AB 130, in terms of the university grants at the UCs, the university grant can be the cost of attendance, which is what the cost of attendance, less the self-help expectation, which means the estimated family contribution of the school. So students can have a good amount of their of their tuition and cost of attendance paid for, meeting that March 2nd deadline. For scholarships through the 130, those vary by campus, but because the UCs have a lot of institutional funds and they're not just based on state grants or state grants only, then those criteria vary by campus, but I would say now is a time that there's a lot more funds at the UCs than percentage-wise than there could be at the CSUs, because we don't have as much institutional funds. They also have the opportunity at the UCs to be able to have a university work study, which is why Rochelle was talking about you want to indicate whether they have DACA or not. And there's a limited number of campuses that offer university loans at the UC level. To my knowledge, there's no loans at the CSUs or at the community colleges for undocumented students. There are some private loans potential based on individual applications of students, but not through the school. And then just in terms of applying for that Cal Grant, so making sure you meet that March 2nd deadline, it's two pieces. Submitting the California DREAM application and also submitting the non-SSN Cal Grant GPA verification form. I apologize, in your packets the dates are wrong, but if you're applying for March the 14-15, you have to have it in by March 2nd, 2014. And even students who are Dreamers who have a Social Security number should still be using the non-SSN GPA verification form. So that's important because sometimes students are confused. Some schools are actually doing an upload of the non-SSN GPA verification form. So you should ask your administrators, or students should actually ask their offices or their guidance counselors, are we submitting it all as one? Did mine go? Or should they actually fill out the form themselves? And then, of course, any information mailed to CSAC, such as a signature page or that GPA verification form, should definitely get a certificate of mailing. That way you can prove that if you did the March 2nd, but the deadline when it didn't get received by that date, the student can prove that they submitted their paperwork by the stated deadline. And then in terms of Cal Grants, this is a great thing that they have online already, that students should, once if they're applying for a Cal Grant, create a Web Grants for Students account. They're going to need their DREAM ID to be able to sign in. But once they create this Web Grants account, this is where they're actually going to check the status. What's going on with my Cal Grant? Was it awarded? Was it not awarded? And most importantly, what is the school that's awarded up there? The California Student Aid Commission actually takes the first school that you list on your DREAM application, and they send the Cal Grant information, or they think that that's the school that you're going to go to. So if you listed a bunch of schools on the DREAMs, or your students did, they want to make sure that they go back to that spot and make sure the proper school is listed, so Cal Grant sends that information to the proper school. And then, like we were talking about the BOG fee waivers, this is what the community college, some community colleges want them to do the DREAM application and the BOG fee waiver. Others just have them do the standard BOG fee waiver. Last year, there was actually like a BOG fee waiver for AB 540 students and another BOG fee waiver for other students. This year, they've just combined it. So there's just a standard BOG fee waiver, and it just asks within there, are you an AB 540 student? And then this part's really important in terms of the selective service registration. I'm not sure if you guys already saw this on the application, but males between the ages of 18 and 25, even on undocumented males, must require with selective service to be able to get their actual grants at the universities that they're at. If a student, so everybody who's between the ages of 18 and 25, or at the point at which they turn 18, are required to register with selective service and provide that proof to the Office of the Financial Aid where they're going to be attending. If anybody's over 26, so if you have older students you're working with and they're trying to get DREAM Aid now, and they were already over 26 when this went through, they should write a letter, explain what happened to the selective service, and the selective service will send them a letter back and say, okay, well, we're not going to hold up your financial aid. But they actually have to go through that process, write the letter, get the letter back from the selective service if you're over 26, and bring both of those to the financial aid office to get that hold lifted. So a lot of students are like, I got my aid, I'm ready, like, why isn't it coming, why isn't it coming? And it's because they haven't taken the step, and it takes 2 to 3 months for the selective service to actually send you that paperwork back. So really important to jump on it early, and they cannot register right online. Like FAFSA students can be like, register me now, and it does it. But they don't register in the same way. They need to use a selective service postcard. And again, thanks to Cal Grant, because they put that right on the California DREAM Act this year. They put the postcard right there. You can just print on it and up it comes, or you can go to the post office and actually get this and mail it in. At our school, I'll get you one sec. They ask for a certificate of mailing. For the very first semester, if you bring us that certificate of mailing proving that you sent in your postcard, we'll waive your hold for 1 semester. Because we know it takes a while for that to come back. I'm not sure that's true at every school, but you could try that with the schools that you're at. Did you have a question? Someone had a question? Sorry.
In terms of the UCs, what would happen for a student that's turning 18 in September, including freshmen that is in second year?
Yeah, they need to file once they turn 18.
For the second year. The first year it won't catch. Sorry?
Approved?
That's what I was just explaining. They send the
Right.
postcard. The selective service will send them a letter back and say, you're registered, here's your number. They bring a copy of that card to the office, and then they know that they're registered.
Unfortunately, for FAFSA students, we can electronically find out
Right.
if they've registered. For these students, we cannot, for a variety of reasons, good and bad. So we need them to bring proof to the school of the selective service registration.
Yeah, and in the same way at
We'll ask them for
SSS.gov,
it.
students with socials could go ahead and register online, but not students who have socials through DACA. So again, it's all about this postcard right here for our male students between the ages of 18 and 25 or even over 26 to make sure that they actually are going to get the aid that they deserve. And then just in terms of submitting the application, the student's going to choose their user ID and their password. Did you have a follow-up about that?
Yeah, it was just in terms of, well, the students turning 18 in September and we start school in late September, they wouldn't get that verification.
What it is, it's on the application, it's based on the date they do their application. So if they're not 18 yet at the time they apply for their DREAM application, that full year, they're exempt from that requirement. If they'd already turned 18, maybe it was a late filer and they weren't they were just applying late. And they turned 18 yesterday and they're doing their DREAM application today, that student then is held to that requirement. So if they're 17, that first
Yeah.
application, they're good.
Yeah.
The second time they apply, because you have to do this every year. That next time, then they're going to be caught in that, I am now in that 18 to, actually it's 18 to under 26. So the student who's 25 3/4 still can register. But as soon as they hit 26, if they fail to register, they can't. So it's always going to be a barrier after
But in
that.
that situation, I would still encourage them to file with Social Security, with Selective Service as early as possible because this postcard process takes longer than the electronic.
Do UCs take the certificate?
Of mailing, it's school by school. You do.
I jumped over a slide back here that I just want to make sure that I talk about. We're talking all about undergraduate aid, right? Undergraduate aid, Cal grants. But I just want to talk about in terms of for graduate schools, there is a lot of departmental funds available, both at the CSUs and the UCs, and it varies by campus for graduate students. My understanding is that at the CSUs, for the university grants, you still are able to get a state university grant as a graduate student. But that's not true at the UCs, and your Cal grants are only for undergraduates, and EOPs are only for undergraduates. So I apologize for the back and forth, but I just wanted to point that out, that we've been talking mostly about undergraduate aid, but this is the differences in that there's not the same aid for graduate level. Okay, so just in terms of going back, and we're getting close to the end of this part of the presentation, in terms of submitting the application, the parent, just to make sure that when the parent does that extra step I said of add parent signature, and the parent's going to have to put in their name, their wages, and their birth date to actually create a parent PIN. So with the FAFSA application, you get your PIN on the side. With the DREAM application, the student actually submits the application, and then they go back and get the parent signature or get the parent PIN and add the parent PIN. The thing that's also true for parents that are filling this out, you have a PIN for every single student. So if you're used to working with a FAFSA, the parent has one PIN and they use that to sign all of their students' applications. With the DREAM application, you get an individual PIN for each student, and that's the application PIN that you use to sign for the student that you're working on right then. And then you should use that confirmation tab right away. Did the parent signature stick? Did my signature stick? Is there anything else that we need to do in terms of successfully submitting the application? It's a great tool. And then just to highlight some of the common problems that we have in terms of for students to be able to fill out the application or receive it. Lots of times the student name doesn't match. So So it's really important that the name that the student has at the school is their legal name, and that that's the same name that they use with the California Dream application. If a student has 4 names that they use on the Dream application and 3 names that they use at the school, it might not match up. So the names need to be exactly the same. They get kind of put in this holding cell, and they never really kind of come through unless they can match up all the names. Also, just missing the deadline's bad. They don't have the parent's signature. Legal guardianship, it's like from another country, the way that I was explaining before. And then they're not classified as AB 540 students, so they forget to register, so the funds can actually come out once the application has been processed. So if you guys know about these up front, then you can kind of help your students to make sure that they don't go through these pitfalls and their application can be successfully processed. And then just please, I know you guys are doing this already, but just working with all of our students to make sure that they understand that they're the ones that are responsible to check their status of their application. We, the schools, can do all that we can, and we're going to try to put the information out there, but if the student doesn't look and know that they need to do these steps, then we can't process the application further. So check the confirmation page, check at all the schools that they've applied to, checking the email that they used to fill out the application with, checking the CSAC Cal Grant, like I said, and then be proactive, right? Call, go to the office, check it out to see, so that you can make sure when your school's going to start that your money's going to be waiting for you when you get there. And then there's just lots of great places to get help. The California Student Aid Commission has lots of information. There's a phone number students can call. There's also the caldreamact.org and the financial aid offices. And there's lots of great, like I was talking about Cal Dream Act, this is what it looks like now in the 14-15. This is where you can get the selective service form. This is where you can get paper instructions. This is where you can get a Spanish version of it. All of it's there, right there for you to download it, print it. And that's really how I learned a lot about the information, was going through the application, going through the 64 pages of instructions that they have about how you can fill out the Dream application. But all the information's there. It's just taking the time and trying to like dig through it. But now with all those pop-ups, it makes it a lot easier for you too. So you don't have to go through every step, but if you want to, it's right there. And then we have these guidelines for 14-15, which I created, which is just kind of like a one-page down and dirty in terms of trying to get your information ready. It's not everything you need, but it kind of sets the stage of what you need to do. And you can get that on our AB 540 website at San Francisco State, or hit me up at lunch, and I have some that I forgot to bring right now. And then we have an AB 540 website where you can get those guidelines, or right on here. There's also information overall about the DREAM Act, and then information also for state. But San Francisco State has good resources. UC Berkeley just came out with their amazing UC Berkeley website. And then there's also just resources for the whole UCs. UC of California information specifically about the DREAM, help from UC Berkeley, and there's actually a DREAM at berkeley.edu that students can send emails to. So there's lots of information that's out there. And then of course our amazing E4FC always has lots of great information, downloadable and free. They just came out with a new DREAM Act guide that I helped to write. They have a financial aid guide, scholarship list, so all that information's there and free for you to look at. And then just make a friend in financial aid. You already have one, that's me. And you should be trying to make friends with financial aids, and all, you have 3, right? You have 3 right here, and then 4 because Brian's a bonus financial aid man. He's like kind of top of the top because CSAC. So those are good friends to make. And you want to make friends in all of the offices that you're going to, because you'll see today, right, over 600 people that are here. I've gone from starting with this E4FC 3 or 4 years ago when people are kind of quiet, people are standing up, and there's people at almost every single university. You might have to dig a little bit and try to find out who, but who knows the information so that you can get that pathway in for your students. And so after that whirlwind presentation, we're now going to just pass to questions and answers that you have, and you can just address them to all of us or address them to the UCs, the CSUs, so that you can get the answers to your burning questions maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There you go.
I have a question about the GPA verification. There was some confusion about units. So I was told that if students, I'm from one of the UCs, and if students have less than 36 units at a UC, then they may have to go to their high school or community college to do GPA verification. Is that how? Can someone clarify?
I can answer that. The question was, at what point do you stop using a high school GPA for a student and move on to college? The high school entitlement program is a 2-year window to apply. So regardless of how much college the student has, the March 2nd deadline before they graduate high school and the March 2nd deadline after they graduate high school, they should use their high school GPA. Even if they've already started college, they've graduated, they're sitting in the seat at college and they're earning units, use the high school GPA in that 2-year window. After that 2-year window, then that's where the units come into play. So once the student is after the 2-year entitlement Cal Grant window, then if they have 24 college semester units, they use the college GPA, or if they have 36 quarter units, that's when they would use the college GPA. Remember though that the GPA is most important for the Cal Grant program, so there's not as much aid available to students who are beyond that 2-year window. But in the case of the community colleges, there's a transfer Cal Grant, a transfer entitlement Cal Grant that makes use of the community college GPA. So just make sure they file the DREAM Act application and get their DREAM Act GPA in as soon as they can.
Just to clarify, using the college GPA, unless they're in that transfer entitlement window from the community colleges, is not going to qualify them for an entitlement. Correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so it's the high school GPA, either that senior year or 1 year out, that allows them to get up to 4 years of Cal Grant eligibility, or before they turn 27 with the GPA and that transfer year, that they can get a Cal Grant A or B going to the 4-year university after leaving community college. Those are the only times that the GPA is really important for these students. We should be sending them every year anyway, but those are the ones that really hit.
And is there an age limit for applying? Is 27?
27,
the
so
age limit?
up until they're 27, they can do the transfer entitlement. So we have some of our older students who probably never thought that this might be an opportunity for them when they were 18 or 19 that are at the community colleges. So as long as we can get them out and transferred before they turn 27, that they could be in this pool. But if not, they still have eligibility for the SUG, don't they?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And they also have eligibility for the blue and gold. If they were otherwise meeting those income eligibility and not getting a Cal Grant, then you have that option.
Right, so at a UC, you probably already know this, but at a UC, if they for some reason didn't qualify for a Cal Grant through no fault of their own, right? They aged out or the law wasn't in place at the time they graduated from high school, the UCs will backfill that Cal Grant with university grant. I don't think that other schools are necessarily able to do that, but the UCs will do that. So if they just fail to apply, that's a different story. But if they couldn't get a Cal Grant through no fault of their own, they would get a UC.
So if I have a returning student who's like 26 years old, he graduated from high school many years ago, can he still apply to be AB 540?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not that they apply, they meet eligibility.
Yeah.
So if they meet that 3 years of high school in California and graduate, or the equivalent of a high school diploma, Chesapeake or the GED, they're considered AB 540 eligible. So at any public institution, regardless if they're Cal Grant eligible, it could be a 30-year-old student, they pay in-state fees versus being charged out-of-state tuition.
Right. They don't apply, but there is an affidavit they need to fill out stating that.
Yeah,
They're in
that's
that
kinda like-
situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like application at the CSU, and that you do have to turn in your affidavit, and you have to turn in your official high school transcripts, even if you're a transfer student and you're going from the 2-year university to the 4-year university. Normally, you'd only have to turn in your community college transcripts, but if you're applying as an AB 540 student, you'd also have to turn in your high school transcripts so they could actually match that to the affidavit and prove that you were there for the 3 years. I think some community colleges process that differently, but it's always good to just turn in the affidavit and the official high school transcripts to verify.
Yeah, that's going to be campus to campus. I think most community colleges don't require the transcripts.
Okay.
They take, unless there is a change in status, because on the application for admissions it said one thing, and now they're trying to change their status to AB 540. They need to then document the change.
Yeah.
Give us a sense of the percentage of the applicants for Cal Grants that actually get Cal grants, or really what I'm asking is how many, any idea of the number that remain unserved because there isn't enough money?
The entitlement Cal Grant program is fully funded. So if you're in that 2-year window around high school graduation, you're guaranteed funding if you meet the financial requirements and you meet the March 2nd deadline. If you've been at a community college and you're 27 or under, and you meet the requirements, meet the March 2nd deadline, you're guaranteed funding to attend a 4-year university. So it's not so much a matter of running out of money, it's a matter of reaching out and finding all the students and making sure they apply. One statement that I'm sure we've all used in financial aid is don't disqualify yourself. Submit the application and have the financial aid professionals tell you that you're not eligible. Now last year, we had a DREAM Act application and we're giving out Cal Grants, and we were just beginning to get more programs at the universities for undocumented students. And that's going to grow every year. So whatever we heard last year doesn't apply anymore. There's more programs, there's loans available going now at most UC campuses, which are, there was only a small number last year, and now almost every campus has a program. So the point is that get people to fill out the application, and then, okay, maybe they won't get a Cal Grant, but there'll be university aid available, and more opportunities every year.
And is it true that AB 540 students are also eligible for the middle class scholarship?
There's a new middle class scholarship for 14-15. Students who don't get a Cal Grant, don't get a Pell Grant because their income is too high, incomes up to $150,000 in the family can get what's called a middle class scholarship. And so there's another reason why every student should apply, because new programs are introduced each year.
I also wanted to just add to that I think that some students do meet that March 2nd deadline and apply on time, but don't realize all the extra steps that take place after you apply. Checking on your application, making sure your Cal Grant is going to the right school, getting the income verification papers if you need to, making sure you got the selective service card in if that was necessary. So some of it is because enough people don't apply. Some of it is because we're working as a new program to try to make sure that we process it as successfully as we can. But another part of it is making sure that we're in a partnership with the students so that they're providing us with the information that they need, or they are making the information that they need, and then we also as schools are trying to build stronger systems of support to get that information to flow through clearly.
So this is not at all my area of expertise, so excuse me if my question sounds naive, but I work a lot with families like filling out applications for like CalFresh and Health Pack and different government programs, and there's just often a lot of anxiety about sort of how this could impact their immigration status, and so I'm just sort of wondering what you all say to families, or how you explain sort of sharing this kind of personal and financial information with a government program, like what the security is being offered to families around that.
Well, gladly. Understand that AB 540 went into effect in 2001, so the public campuses have a lot of practice in dealing with that student population and keeping their data private. They're not allowed to share the data. It's not going to go anywhere except the campus financial aid office. So the message is, of course, is provide these students with a high confidence level that this is not data that's going to end up with other agencies or groups that might not have their best interest in mind. And likewise, at the Student Aid Commission, we've been collecting FAFSA data for the last 23 years. They've been using it, and we don't share that data. We don't share DREAM Act data either. It's a slam dunk. The campuses are committed to making sure that that's safe data.
So speaking from a financial aid office, I would say, there's often a lot of anxiety, not only about filling out the form, but especially if they get selected for verification and we ask for the tax forms themselves. We only use those tax forms to verify the income and asset data that determines their financial aid eligibility. We are in no way looking for, is that your real social security? We're not going to know. Is that your real social? I'm not saying they should commit fraud. But we're not looking for that. We're not looking for what's your immigration status of the parents. We're not looking for that. And we don't share that information with anyone. We don't even share the information that that student filled out a DREAM application as opposed to a FAFSA. That's between us and them, and it's all protected by privacy laws and our own code of conduct. So we try to assure parents, like, that's all we're doing. This is a requirement that you're selected, that we verify your income. It's important, as Brian stated, to preserve the program. And so we need to follow these rules, and you need to give us these papers to help your child. And beyond that, those papers aren't going anywhere.
And that was why the Student Aid Commission this last year added those questions onto the DREAM application to make sure that particularly DACA students weren't going to the FAFSA, because that was actually one of the concerns, is having a undocumented student who now has a social security number through DACA going to the FAFSA and applying for a federal benefit, which gets right to your point of applying for something maybe unknowingly that could or could not impact them in the future should there be some sort of legal recourse to make their status legal, that they have to say, well, yeah, I did actually apply for something that I wasn't eligible for. So DREAM application, DREAM application, DREAM application is what we are telling them.
So my question is related to what you just discussed. Have students ever filled out the DREAM Act in such a way that has made it difficult for them to qualify for DACA? Maybe they use 2 different social security numbers. Any common obstacles?
DACA wouldn't know because we
Yeah.
don't share that data.
Yeah.
So they should be consistent. And there's a message here. If your name is one name on the college's information, they should hopefully be using the same name on the DREAM Act application so that we can match those together. And that was an issue last year. We just couldn't identify who is this student. And eventually we contact the campus or contact the student and say, where are you? Who are you? So we could make them the financial aid award that we want to do.
And that means that their aid is delayed in getting to them. If we don't have the right application, if we can't go through the steps, and we can't award them the money. So this is a way that they can work on ensuring that that aid is going to be processed in the quickest manner possible.
By the way, thank you so much for doing this workshop. I feel like all my burning questions have been addressed. But I do have a question about the Social Security number, because I came across a student who received a Social Security number through a petition, but is still currently out of status. So how should they complete the application, and if they should complete the DREAM application or the FAFSA?
Are they still, they're considered, they're not a temporary resident, they were given a social security number? They might want to talk to their attorney and find out, because normally a social security number is not going to be given to somebody who hasn't had at least some sort of adjustment. It might be temporary, but if it doesn't qualify them for eligibility, they still meet AB 540 eligibility if they went 3 years.
Yeah,
3 years of high school, graduated.
That's right. AB 540 doesn't say, do you have a social security number? And there's actually 3 types of social security numbers that'll be issued. One for permanent residents and citizens, one for work only, and then this extra one that's not valid for work only. And if they have that, again, it goes back to what is your status as far as your immigration status with the United States, and do you meet the AB 540 criteria?
And when they go online, because it says do you have a social, yes, no, and then did you get it from DACA, yes, no, and they would click yes and no on the application.
So if you say
yes.
no, yeah. Okay. So if you say no that you don't have the social security number through DACA, then it explains to you other options you should take, right?
Yeah, we walk them through, because understand that persons who are here temporarily with a visa, except the U visa and the T visa, can't get financial aid. And that includes student visas and work visas, diplomatic visas. Those persons are just not eligible, either for the FAFSA federal aid or the DREAM Act aid. So we ask them questions to make sure that we're getting the correct population. And if it looks like they should be filling out the FAFSA, we say, you should fill out the FAFSA. You have a social, you didn't get it through DACA, go to that application and complete it.
The U visas will have social security numbers because they have employment authorization, but they can't do the FAFSA. but they also have to meet AB 540 eligibility. So if they received a U visa, but they grew up, they've been living in Arizona and they move here, they don't qualify as an AB 540 student. So they're caught in this limbo.
So you're saying that if they're using someone else's social security number, they should mark yes?
No, they shouldn't be using somebody else's social security number. That would be the answer. Yeah.
Probably it's implied, and maybe we want to add it to the, do you have a valid social security number? But yeah, if they have been using someone else's number, they should just say, I don't have a number, and go on from there.
They should not apply for financial aid with someone else's social security. They do not need a social security number for the DREAM Act, so they should not do that.
And if you were to use a social security number on the FAFSA, that was an incorrect social security number, they match that with the Department of Homeland Security. So the California DREAM application doesn't have that match in terms of is this social, like they're not asking for socials, but they're not cross-checking in that way. If you use a social through the FAFSA application, they might be able to apply, and then the application might actually be sent to the school if they fill it out in a way that's not completely understood. But then they'll get a hold that says you need to clear this Department of Homeland Security hold and show that you actually have the eligibility to apply for the FAFSA. And some students at that point will be like, oh, okay, and then they'll bring a copy of their DACA, which doesn't work. And at that point, they've waited all these months to be told, you know what, you filled out the wrong application. Let me see if I can work with CSAC and their good graces to be able to get them to honor the DREAM application once you actually fill out the DREAM. So it's really important for them not to fill out the incorrect application.
I think that one in the back was first and then over here.
That's probably all.
What advice do you have for us to best support the students who are kind of left in limbo, who don't qualify for FAFSA or the DREAM Act, who are undocumented but don't meet the
Look at the list of scholarships in here and have them apply for as many as possible.
Is that it?
Well, I mean, there are some other, I mean, I would say use the E4FC resources as best you can. There's some great legal advice about how to set yourself up as a, an entity that's other than an individual that can earn money. And I don't want to go too deeply because that's not my area of expertise, but I'd say explore as many avenues as possible that don't have to do with applying for the need-based aid through the DREAM.
And I think it is hard because there's sort of a hierarchy now in terms of everybody before, nobody really was able to get aid, and nobody had the eligibility to be able to work, and now some people have DACA, some people have DREAM, and then there are other students that are unfortunately left without either of those two options. And I know that's really disheartening to speak to those students, but the thing that I try to speak and the advice that I try to give them is just to try to give them examples of other students that I know that I was just working with like 2 or 3 years ago. One of the students, amazing student at our school, fought for the ability to be able to have the DREAM Act and then graduated right before the DREAM aid was able to be given to him. So I do think it's important just to remember that there's lots of scholarships out there. There's many students who have gone through these pieces of being able to get the funds, but also to know that it is hard and to reach out for the resources in the same way that Rochelle was speaking.
Rochelle, here at Cal, have you had any plans or discussions about this new program that President Obama has announced with this 3-year, I don't know how much of dollars?
Well, unfortunately, it's 1 year, and it's $5 million for the whole system. So in terms of the financial aid dollars that we're getting at Cal, it's $440,000 or something. It's not a huge amount of money. Our current plan for that money, and we've been discussing it with some student groups and across the system, is to create this loan program. Because that is the gap so for our students, we take their cost of attendance, minus any EFC off the DREAM application, and then there's a standard loan and work expectation for all students that varies at the UC campuses between $8,000 and $10,000. So, and the rest is all grants and scholarships. So that portion, students need to find loans, work, or outside scholarships, or scrimping, or figuring out, and that's quite a bit of money. And at Cal, they can get up to $4,000 of work study if they have work authorization, so if they're DACA. And at various UCs that varies, but the one hole that's really there is that loan. So we're hoping to make a sustainable loan program that through the years we can have an equivalent package for a AB 540 undocumented student as all the other students. So that's I'm not sure we'll quite get there with the dollar amounts, but that's our goal.
How would they repay back if they didn't have work authorization.
If you can get this far, that you can get to Cal, you're gonna be able to figure out.
Yeah, that's true.
And what I would say is, I'm guessing that we'll have a pretty liberal, if students really are in trouble and can't pay it back, we're not gonna let that ruin their life. We'll have deferrals, we'll have waivers. I mean, we haven't developed it, so I'm not promising anything. But I can tell you it is in no way the intention of the university to go after those alumni later and you couldn't pay back this, right? The intent is to help.
Well, I want to thank all of you guys for helping, and thanks to our presenters.